roughly $87,563 is what we could have recoverable amount.
That's my estimate at this point. And again, I should hear back from them in a couple of days. I thought that I would hear from them today. They did have a big press event with the governor or something or they were planning to have that, either had it soon or recently in Mercer County. And I know that they were all hands on deck to try to prepare for that. So they got waylaid at the beginning of this week.
And Jeff, you may need to check some past documents from years back, but I'm almost certain that Frailinger has in fact gone in over there and did some topographical surveys.
I know we had them do, when you install monitoring wells, we have to have those surveyed, so we have accurate elevations. I know they did survey some of the monitoring wells for us. We don't have a topographic survey in our files anywhere, so.
So the topo survey and what Frailinger did are kind of two different surveys, in other words.
Yes.
Correct. But again, it's possible you may have one in your files. I don't know.
If we do, that may have been something, because the only involvement that I've had with this landfill is dealing with LRS, your company, and there could very well be some past surveys that were done by R&B. I don't know. I really don't know that answer. That's something that was done from a previous council,
Right.
even before I got on.
Yeah, it would be a little bit difficult if they were paper. We can usually pull it off and transfer it into CAD, but
So where are we right now? We're in phase 2 and proceeding to do phase 3?
I'm sorry. Oh, you mean from the memo?
Now, what phase are we in within the landfill reacclimation right now are we in? There's several different phases, so where are we at? What's the phase number?
Well, the phases were something that was in the solicitor's memo. There's not really a phase process with that, within the DEP process. But we are, I know that there's still some work to do. Again, I don't think the ecological evaluation is necessary, but the Pinelands Commission does. So, other than that, we would be, in the home stretch with the portions of tax B, C, and D. And if we had the survey, that's all we would have left to really accomplish. Depending upon if there's any physical work that the landfill closure plan design needs to be done for stormwater management. The plan all along has kind of been to just leave it as it is. We've part of the original ecological survey talked about the impact on the environment that clear cutting trees, installing an impermeable cap on top of the landfill, and what a kind of a detrimental environmental impact that would have versus leaving it in its current condition and allowing the chemicals that the low concentrations of chemicals that were there to naturally attenuate. So that was what the ecological evaluation was before. The Pineland wants us to now look at the details of what is actually, possibly impacting the wetlands area and any, another species survey of what, invertebrates and other animals are perhaps living in that area, and are they uptaking any of these compounds, ammonia, nitrogen, and are some of the things that have been mentioned in the memo. So that's work that needs to be done.
Mr. Day, is there any percentage of what we've already paid able to be reimbursed by any grants that are out there?
There could be. I apologize. I didn't have a chance to go back and look at that. I had another fire I had to put out this afternoon. It was on my agenda, my plan, but I will look at that. Any of the remedial investigative costs, there are, for example, I know that we did a supplemental, looking back here, hang on with me one second. We did a supplemental investigative and monitoring well installation and groundwater sampling event, again at the request of the Pinelands. That was about $46,000. So some of those past costs could also be eligible. We'd certainly put everything in the application that we think could possibly be eligible. And
Well, no, I'm actually talking about any fees that we've already paid.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, okay.
This supplemental investigation was
So
done.
you're looking
years
at
ago.
past, not the new
Yes,
approval.
yes,
Okay,
past, right.
I apologize.
No, the numbers kind of sound the same, so I understand.
Yeah.
So this
So,
money that,
would you be able to look into that and let us know that?
Yes, I was planning, like I said, I was planning to do that before the meeting, and I apologize. I just had to put out another fire today.
So with the proposal that you have, is there any way, before we move any further, that we could have a letter, a memo, something from the Pinelands saying, like, pretty much, yes, if you guys do this, that we're requesting, that what they want and what you propose on doing is one and the same to get us to the next step?
I don't know, perhaps Mayor or Councilman Dilge, did you review the proposal scope with the Pinelands Commission? I thought I might have heard that. I have not done that, but we can certainly submit them the scope, and I don't know, we can ask them to opine on it. I'm not sure that they would, but.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that it's not a good thing to spend the residents' money if in fact that this may not get us to where we need to go to in the first place.
No, that's a good question. Again, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. They have continued it. We've done investigative work they've asked for. We've given them information. They've asked for more. So, very legit question. They indicate it depends on the outcome of the study and what the study says. I fully expect, as does our ecological specialist, that based on the data and our familiarity with it, that it's going to indicate that there's no, significant detrimental impact to this current situation and the future, as these compounds continue to naturally degrade and attenuate. But we won't know that until we actually do the study. If it says that per the guidance that the DEP has, which again we're very familiar with, that's what the Pinelands Commission says in their memo. If we do it consistent with those with the technical guidance, we should be in good shape. But we can certainly ask them.
Okay.
Jeff, if I could ask a question. You indicated that there could be some recoverable monies from a previous work order that was done. Just out of curiosity, why didn't we apply for the HGSRF reimbursement when this work was done? How did that get put off to the side?
Well, we started working on remedial action, Mayor. Again, the remedial action work plan and the remedial action activities that we did do, those are not eligible. And then supplemental to that, the Pinelands Commission asked for these investigations. So I don't know the answer to that question specifically. I know it wasn't done. It's possible it could have been. Again, I understood, or I know at some point in the past there was an escrow fund at the city for some of this work. So.
And Randy, let me ask you, what was your opinion when Edwin Growski was talking? Maybe I got this wrong, but I could have swore that I was understanding it. Once we did this final evaluation, we should be able to get the final, and I used the word should, but I'm pretty sure that I heard him say that once this final ecological report was put together that we're speaking of right at this moment, once that was concluded, we should be in a position then to have the sign-off letter and to then just begin the 30-year monitoring process. Did you understand the same thing, Randy and Jeff?
Okay, let me give you my impression, if I may.
Sure, that's what I'm asking.
I was new to the ballgame. I don't know all the history that you folks know, or that maybe Mr. Pogue knows. I got involved in this really the day of the conference call on January 15th. But I will tell you, Mr. Wengrowski, Ed Wengrowski was very forthcoming in our conversation. It lasted over an hour. And obviously, he has a relationship with Mr. Day, a working relationship, a good working relationship. And I think what's going on here is you have two governmental agencies with concurrent jurisdiction over this landfill. You have DEP and Pineland. And what's good for DEP isn't necessarily good for Pinelands. And what brought about some of this discussion was Mr. Wengrowski's memo of February 10th, 2020. And there was some concern about the content of some of the items in that memo that sparked everyone's interest. And I hadn't spoken with Mr. Day, but I could sense from some of his comments during the conference call that he doesn't completely agree with everything that's in the February 10th, 2020 memo. But we didn't get into that because we're trying to find a way to get from where we are to the end of the tunnel. So it was not the setting to create an antagonistic atmosphere.
No,
So
definitely not.
what we learned was this. I mean, there was a reference in the February 2020 memo that some of the information was not usable, that some of the information was inconsistent over a period of years prior to 2017. And I don't know whether that information was usable by DEP. I suspect that it was, but for Pineland's purposes, they weren't happy with that information. They think there may have been some mechanical errors in mislabeling of the wells at different reporting times, but they did look at the data from 2017 and 2018, and they were totally satisfied with that information. So the work that was done in the monitoring certainly satisfied DEP because DEP has already issued, for lack of a better description, no further action letter that they're satisfied with the condition of the landfill. And it's now gotten you into a position where you can then begin to implement these final steps in closing this landfill. In the report that I gave you, the phases that I created, they were my creation because I wanted to try to put this in an outline form so that you could understand the process going forward. And the next step in the process is absolutely the ecological evaluation. That has got to be done. Pinelands is not going to let you move forward unless you do that. And based on that ecological evaluation, the Pinelands Commission coordinator, who is Mr. Wengrowski, then makes a recommendation to the director. And in the February 2020 memo, it read as if they were requiring an impermeable cap. And in the conference call on January 14th, Mr. Wengrowski sort of backed off of that position and said, that's the preferred, for lack of a better description, that's the Cadillac, is the impermeable cap. But the Pinelands Commission understands the financial constraints face all municipalities, and Estell Manor probably more so because you've lost a lot of your pilot funding. And assuming the ecological evaluation is not devastating, and Mr. Day doesn't think it's going to be, he thinks it's going to support where you are with DEP. DEP has said there's nothing here that worries us. So assuming that the Pinelands Commission reaches that same point after the ecological evaluation, then the Pinelands Commission director makes a recommendation to the director of the Pinelands and says, listen, this place doesn't need an impermeable cap. This landfill does not require that. Either it could be that the current situation is acceptable. It could be they would want you to put more cover on it. There's no way of knowing what they're going to ask for because they're not going to tell you until they get this ecological evaluation. And then once that report is submitted by the coordinator to the director. The director then issues his approval. It's formal approval from the director of a waiver of the permeable cap and approval of an alternate plan, whatever that plan is. Now you go to what I call phase 2, which is the actual closure of the landfill. And that's a dual track. You have to go to Pinelands for part of it, and you got to go to Estell for part of it. Hopefully they, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, but they indicated that they do communicate with each other. At least they said they did.
They do.
So you have to make an application to the Pinelands for a development permit, and that's for stormwater management. And then you also, at the same time, you do it all at the same time, you make a landfill closure plan to the DEP, which is also required for stormwater management. So it's all stormwater management. And hopefully the two agencies agree on what's needed for stormwater management, where they work out a compromise. And then once you get through that part, then you get the public development approval from the Pinelands, and from DEP you get a landfill closure approval, and then a post-closure monitoring plan. And the mayor asked the question, we've been monitoring these wells since, what was it, 2009, Mayor?
No,
Oh, no.
Randy, actually, we started monitoring these wells back around 1991 or 2 when we were ordered closed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We've actually, in fact, monitored them for 30 years now.
1987, Mayor. I have a sheet here.
1987, okay.
That's the first data that we have, yeah.
So the mayor essentially asked Pinelands, can we get credit for time served? And Pinelands said no. And what they said is that your 30-year monitoring requirement begins once these final closure approvals are granted. So you have this proposal from RCC. I'll be honest with you, I don't have any means by which to evaluate them for cost effectiveness, but I mean, you've been working with RCC for how many years? I mean, a long time. The only additional expenses, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, that I saw was any expenses for additional monitoring or remediation that are required by the Pinelands Commission, because there's no further remediation required by DEP, correct?
Yeah, so there was some minor issues in the remedial action work plan as far as remediation goes. There was some surface dumping, and there were a couple areas where the cap was not, just very small areas, like, the size of a bedroom, if you will, in a couple spots where the cap wasn't 2 feet thick. We've already removed that waste that was on the surface and graded those cap areas out, years ago, in anticipation of, the Pineland Commission approving the plan. Again, this is years ago. So the question is going to come down to the design and the management of the stormwater, and if both agencies are comfortable with the current conditions there. So.
And that was my next expense item that I noted, which is there are unknown expenses related to the stormwater management. And they may not be any, they may be minimal. It's just, you just don't know what these agencies are going to do. And then the only other future expenses would be the future monitoring plan that they require you to implement. So I think from what I've learned in the past month, it seems to me that you are close to the finish line here. And definitely. And the work that you've done has resulted in you getting to this point. So you're substantially along the process. And, I mean, now there was a question raised by some folks about potential utilization for solar energy on the site. And I don't know I know a little bit about solar, just enough to be dangerous, but I do know that site location is critical, location in proximity to substations and other other electrical facilities is critical. I mean, I know that with Price's Pit, for example, they're putting solar on that, but there's almost a $600,000 expense in getting the power from the solar to the substation. So I don't know the feasibility of putting solar on this, whether it's feasible at all. But what Mr. Wengrowski did say is that if you're looking at that pathway, you need to look at that pathway at the time that you're dealing with the stormwater management program, because the solar could affect the stormwater management. Am I correct, Mr. Day? Is that what he said?
Yes, that's correct. We would always put the solar design, or at least the conceptual solar design, in as part of the closure plan to both agencies, because you don't want to have to go back and, sit in front of the Pinelands Commission again, basically.
It was one development application.
Correct, right. Yeah, one development application, right.
Yeah, if I could ask this question, when we had that meeting that day, correct me if I'm wrong, but the stormwater management plan, that was discussed in the event that we're going to put solar development on top of the landfill area itself.
No, no, it's required it's required in any case.
So it is required. Okay.
Yeah, the closure plan, the Pinelands Commission rules and regs are concerned about the stormwater, as is the landfill closure plan. And the one, as mentioned, a couple things. Number one, my father, who's passed, would be upset if I didn't tell you. My last name is actually pronounced Dye. No offense. No offense. No offense at all. I got all kinds of relatives up in the Ewing area, and some of them pronounce it Day. So, hey, it's okay, right? So, no offense. Anyway, a couple things, if I may. The data, I don't know why the Pinelands Commission doesn't like our data from 2009 to 2017. The errors in the reading is this file I have here, which or this table, which is the monitoring that was done from 1987 till sometime in the middle of 2006 when we first got involved. That's the NJPDES, New Jersey Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit that was in place. Every landfill in the state, whether closed or not, has one of those. They typically require quarterly monitoring, which is gauging. And so somebody, and as I think Ed mentioned, a lot of times it's just contract laboratories, we feel came out and either collected data inaccurately and or gauged one well and called it, gauge 2 and called it 3, gauge 3 and called it 2. And if you can see my sheet here, you can see these highlights on it. The colored ones are the ones that are in error, right? So we identified that in our documents submitted to the department, the DEP, and the Pinelands Commission was aware of it. There's no issues or errors with the data that we had done since that time. And you're right, I don't agree with all of their interpretations in the memo about the groundwater flow and their evaluation of it, but it's neither here nor there because it's not relevant to today's situation, and their determinations were based on data that they're happy with. So that's true.
I'm sure that all of this prior data was also used by the DEP.
Oh yeah, yep.
And them reaching their conclusions.
Yeah, and the other, just want to make sure that nobody runs away with this. We don't have a no further action letter, unfortunately, yet from the DEP. We got the remedial action work plan approval, right? And literally what's been happening for the last 8 years is trying to get the Pinelands to agree with that approval. But as you lined out, there's additional processes here. Because we're in the have been in the HCSRF program in the past, we also have to satisfy the site remediation program. Again, parallel tracks within the DEP. There's a landfill closure plan. Some of the other documents that are referenced in our proposal, the RAR, RAP applications for groundwater, etc. They're required to satisfy that, and then they set up the post-closure monitoring. The good news about there's no good news about 30 years of monitoring, but relative to the NJPDES, which is quarterly groundwater sampling, we'll start off, maybe we'll do quarterly, we'll probably do twice a year, and then we'll switch to yearly, and then we'll switch to every 2 years or 5 years after that for the groundwater sampling. It's going to really be spread out much more and therefore be much more cost effective. So,
So when would, in this process, when would you get a no further action letter from DEP? Is that after the approval of the stormwater management plan?
not to be snide, we won't get one. We'll get the response action outcome issued from the LSRP. That's the current process with the LSRP program, but it's the equivalent of an NFA. But that will be once the landfill closure plan is approved and once the, at the very end of your phase 2, right?
Right.
And when the department, the DEP issues the permits that manage the landfill waste being there for a long period of time and this post-remedial groundwater monitoring, there'll be 2 permits that are issued for the site. And the day those get issued, the day after that, LSRP can issue the response action outcome, which is the equivalent of an NFA.
Okay.
Mr. Dye, question. So with the report that the Pineland said that we can't use those certain years of monitoring, and now that you looked at that and found that it may have just been mismarking, there's no way to go back and try to get credit now that you found that error?
I mean, we could. It's not going to do anything for us.
And let me interject. I mean, we sort of went around that question with Mr. Wengrowski, and he emphasized on multiple occasions that, listen, that data doesn't matter to us. What matters to us is 2017 and 2018, which we're absolutely comfortable with. So it would be an academic argument, Councilwoman. I mean, it doesn't do anything for you. They've progressed to the point where they want this ecological evaluation based on the 2017 and 2018 data. I think I'm saying this right, aren't I, Mr. Dye?
Yes, you are, and Mr. Lafferty, I will agree with you. I've gone toe to toe with Ed on several occasions on this project in the past, and in several others I worked on them, and that wasn't the time to do that. And not to be coy about it, but whatever their concerns are with whatever data, doesn't matter at this point. The DEP again accepted the data from 2009 to 2012 when they made all their approvals. I do not know what the issues are that they have with and then the data from 12 to now is what was in the included in the 17 and 18 reports that they reference in the memo. So
the ecological evaluation, how long does that take about?
it's about a 3 months plus or minus process. We have to actually go out and do. First, we'll have to design the actual. We've got it fairly flushed out, but finalize the design, and it's pretty detailed. There's there's an ecological species inventory, and then there's some sampling within the wetland areas. There's it's hand sampling, and there's some additional water collection, so water and sediment and soil sample collection. You can do food chain modeling, which is like, okay, if this worm gets eaten by this rat, and the rat's eaten by this bird, and that bird's eaten by somebody, how does that all progress through the food chain, and what is the buildup of toxicity throughout? So that's one thing. The other is you actually collect worms, grind them up in a blender, and sample what the ooze that's left. Right, that's another part of the process. And if there was surface water with fish and so forth in proximity, you actually can take fish samples and same blender, right? Different blender, but same blender process, right? So there's a lot of different steps to that part of it, and then that data comes in, and then the ecological. We have a PhD who's our ecological specialist, and he'll evaluate the data and consistent with the guidelines, and again, we're all pretty convinced the conclusion is going to be there's no detrimental effect to public health or the environment.
The ironic part of it was that when talking to Mr. Wengrowski, it doesn't appear that the Pinelands Commission has all of the high-level biologists, et cetera, that they need to review this. And a lot of times, apparently, they rely on the DEP for their analysis. What was kind of interesting, Pinelands is more difficult than the DEP, yet they don't have the staff that would really conduct the analysis. But that's how Pinelands is with everything. I mean, they are a very difficult agency to work with. I've been working with them at times during my entire career, and they just are tough. We did press Mr. Wengrowski on a timetable, and he gave us a soup to nuts, 6 to 9 months. I think that's probably ambitious, but you know, it's you're not looking at years here.
Mhm.